native speakers don't always admire perfect English. Sometimes they admire a person who is brave enough to speak imperfect English. Think about that. You have probably spent years worrying about your accent. You hear yourself speaking, and immediately you hear the mistakes, your pronunciation, your grammar, your vocabulary, your hesitation. Maybe you think they will know I am not a native speaker. Maybe you are afraid someone will laugh. Maybe you are afraid someone will judge you. Maybe you are afraid your accent will make people think you are less intelligent. But what if you have been looking for your accent from the wrong direction? What if your accent isn't evident that you failed to learn English? What if your accent is evidence that you already learned another language? Think about how incredible that actually is. You are speaking English while carrying another language inside your mind, another culture, another history, another childhood, another way of seeing the world. And that changes everything. The word authentically means being genuine, being real, not pretending to be something you are not. And maybe the goal of learning English should be to erase yourself. Maybe the goal is to communicate yourself more clearly. That is completely different mission because there is something people notice when you speak another language. They notice the effort, they notice the courage, they notice the journey. And sometimes that is more powerful than perfect pronunciation. But there is a deeper reason, and this is where your story really begins. Because the first thing your accent can communicate is not weakness. There is enormous pressure to sound like everybody else, especially when you are learning English. You listen to native speakers, you imitate their pronunciation, you study their expressions, you copy the rhythm, you watch their movies, you listen to hear podcasts, and eventually you start asking yourself, do I sound native enough? But why? Why should sound different automatically mean sounding wrong? Let's ask a different question. Can someone understand you? Can you express your ideas? Can you connect with another human being? Can you make someone laugh? Can you tell the story? Can you inspire someone? If the answer is yes, then your English is doing its job. Of course, pronunciation matters, grammar matters, vocabulary matters, clarity matters, but perfection is not moving target. Even native speakers misunderstand each other. They use slang, they mumble, they pronounce words differently, they have regional accents, they make grammatical mistakes. So why should an English learner believe that every sentence must be perfect? You don't need to become someone else. You need to become more understandable. That distinction is powerful because when you stop trying to create your identity, you become more confident. And confidence makes your voice. Your posture changes. Your breathing changes. Your eye contact changes. Your delivery changes. Suddenly, you are not apologizing for your English, you are using it. That is authenticity. And authenticity is attractive, not because it is perfect, because it is real. But authenticity alone isn't enough because there will be days when you make mistake after mistake. There will be moments when your target words, when there will be conversation when you feel completely lost. And that brings us to something even more powerful: resilience. The word, the word resilience means ability to recover and keep going. Think about your first English conversation. Maybe you were nervous. Maybe you translated everything in your head. Maybe you have prepared a sentence and then someone answered too quickly. Suddenly, everything disappeared. You understood you understood nothing, or almost nothing. And what did you do? You probably kept going. That is resilience. Every time you said, "Sorry, I could you repeat that?" You were practicing resilience. Every time you search for a word, you were practicing resilience. Every time someone corrected your pronunciation and you tried again and were practicing you were practicing resilience. Nobody sees all those moments. They only hear the sentence you eventually produce. But behind that sentence, there may be hundreds of failures, thousands of repetitions, years of effort. That is why voice can carry emotional weight. Because people don't only hear vocabulary, sometimes they hear determination. The person speaking English today may have been the person who couldn't say a complete sentence 5 years ago, and that transformation matters. You are proof that humans can learn, human can adapt, human can change, and that is inspiring. Think about a native English speaker hearing someone say, "I know my English isn't perfect, but I am going to keep speaking." That sentence contains something bigger than grammar. It contains courage. And here the paradox. The mistakes you are trying hardest to hide may be the very evidence how hard you worked. So don't worship your mistakes. Learn from them. But don't hate yourself because of them either. Correct the mistake, repeat the sentence, move forward. That is how fluency is built, not through perfection, through repetition, through patience, through resilience. But resilience is not only part of the story, is one part of the story. Because when millions of people being their accent into English, something extraordinary happened. English changes. It becomes more diverse. The word diversity means variety. Different people, different cultures, different perspectives. And English today is not spoken by only a kind of person. It is spoken across the planet. Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, South America, the Caribbean, Oceania. Millions of voices, millions of accents, millions of stories, and every one of those voices add something. Imagine English as a giant conversation. You don't make that conversation smaller by adding more voices. You make it richer. That is the beauty of linguistic diversity. Someone from India may express an idea differently from someone in Canada. Someone from Chile may use a rhythm different from someone in Britain. Someone from Japan may approach pronunciation differently from someone in the United States. Different, but understandable. Different, but connected. And this matter because language is not a museum. Language is alive. It changes. It moves. It travels. It adapts. Every generation changes language. Every culture influences language. Every community adds expressions. So when an ESL learner speak English, they are not simply borrowing a language. They are participating in it. Think about that. You are of the you are part of the English story. That means you should stop learning. That doesn't mean you should stop learning. It means you can learn without feeling ashamed of your identity. Your accent can remain part of your identity. While your communication becomes clearer, that is much healthier goal. And it leads us to the next idea, because learning English doesn't only change the learner, it changes the relationship between cultures. Is that is cultural exchange. The phrase cultural exchange sounds academic, but the idea is simple. You teach me something about the world. I teach you something about mine. That's it. That's the beginning of connection. Imagine two people meeting for the first time, one speaking English naturally, the other learned English as a second language. They don't have identical experience, they don't have identical cultures, they don't have identical accents, but they have something in common. They can communicate, and communication creates curiosity. Where you are from, what is your country like? What food do you eat? What tradition do you have? What was your childhood like? Suddenly, English is not longer just English. It is a bridge. You are using your shared language to discover an unshared experience. This is cultural exchange, and there is something beautiful about it. You don't have to agree on everything. You don't have to you don't have to have the same traditions. You don't have to speak with the same accent. You only need enough respect to listen. And that brings us to the word that is often forgotten in language learning: respect. But living it is not always simple. If someone spends years learning your language, what does tell you? It tells you they value communication with people who speak it. They are investing time, energy, attention, memory. They are making mistakes publicly. They risking embarrassment. They are doing something difficult, and that deserves respect. Think about how difficult it is to speak another language. Now imagine doing it in front of millions of people online. That takes courage, and maybe that best response is not your English is bad. Maybe the better response is I understood you. Maybe it is keep practicing. Maybe it is you are improving. Because correction without encouragement can destroy confidence. But connections with respect can accelerate learning. If you are a native speaker, you have something valuable to offer an English learner. Not perfection, not superiority, patience. When you listen patiently, you give someone permission to continue. And sometimes continuing is the hardest part. This is why an ESL voice can create admiration, not because every sentence is perfect, because someone chooses to enter a difficult conversation instead of remaining silent. And behold, that decision, there is usually a story, a journey, a reason, a dream. And that may be the most powerful part of it. But think about your own journey. Why did you start learning English? Maybe you wanted to maybe you wanted a better job. Maybe you wanted to travel. Maybe you wanted to study. Maybe you wanted to communicate with someone you love. Maybe you simply wanted to challenge yourself. Whatever your reason, your English represents something. It represents movement. You were satisfied with staying exactly where you were. You decided to learn something difficult, and that decision changed you. Maybe you became more confident. Maybe you become more curious. Maybe you discovered people you would never have met otherwise. That is the hidden story behind an ESL voice. The voice may sound different. The human desire behind it is universal. We want to belong. We want to communicate. We want to understand. We want to be respected. We want to connect. And this brings us to the final idea, unity. The word unity means connected as one, not identical, connected. That is an important difference. Unity does not mean everyone must sound the same. It means we can be different and still understand one another. Different accents, different countries, different cultures, different stories, different dreams. One conversation. Think about what English become when we stop treating accent as problems and start treating them as stories. A language spoken by millions doesn't need millions of identical voices. It needs people willing to speak, people willing to listen, people willing to learn. And maybe that is the secret. I promise you that the secret that flips everything you thought about pronunciation, here it is. Your ultimate goal is not sound like someone else. Your ultimate goal is to be understood while reminding yourself. That is it. Clearly over imitation, communication over perfection, confidence over fear. If your accent is understandable, you have succeeded in communication. If your grammar is improving, you are progressing. If you make mistakes, you are learning. If you continue, you are becoming stronger. So don't hide your voice. Improve it. Don't hate your accent. Understand it. Don't fear mistakes. Use them. And don't compare your beginning with someone else's lifetime of speaking English. Your journey is yours. And that is exactly why your voice matters. Maybe today you still hesitate. Maybe you still translate in your head. Maybe you still forget words. Maybe you still hear your accent and wish it sounds different. But listen carefully. You are already doing someone extraordinary. You are speaking to the world and in a language you did not grow in speaking. That takes courage. You are building bridges, one sentence at a time, one mistake at a time, one conversation at a time. And perhaps one day someone else will hear your voice and think, If they can do it, maybe I can do it too. That is how inspiration travels, not from perfection, but from example. So keep speaking, keep learning, keep improving, and keep your accent. It tells the story of where you came from, because your accent isn't the end of your story, it is part of it, and your voice is worth hearing always. Before you leave, I want to challenge you. If you are a part of 1% who finish that they start, comment, I am ready. Not because your English is perfect, because you are ready to keep improving. And if you believe English as a second language voices deserve to be heard, subscribe. Join this movement of people around the world using English to connect cultures, share stories, and make every voice count. Your accent has a story, your journey has value, and your voice deserves to be heard. I see you in the next video.